Wrong because war was not a last resort, because we did not build sufficient alliances, and because we undermined the United Nations. America has drawn a line under Iraq, and so must we. Our alliance with America is incredibly important to us, but we must always remember that our values must shape the alliances that we form and any military action that we take. So many of the world's problems need functioning international institutions. The days in which any country could achieve their goals on their own are over. And there can be no solution to the conflicts of the Middle East without international support, providing pressure where it is right to do so. And let me say this, as Israel ends the moratorium on settlement building, I will always defend the right of Israel to exist in peace and security. But Israel must accept and recognize in its actions the Palestinian right to statehood. That is why the attack on the Gaza flotilla was so wrong. And that is why the Gaza blockade must be lifted, and we must strain every sinew to work to make that happen. And the government has a heavy responsibility and must step up and work with our partners in Europe and around the world to help bring a just and lasting peace in the Middle East. But conference, to achieve all these things, a different economy, a different society, reform of the state, changes in our foreign policy, we must change our politics too. Let's be honest, politics isn't working. People have lost faith in politicians and politics. Trust is gone. Politics is basically broken. Its practice, its reputation, and its institutions. I'm in it, and even I sometimes find it depressing. This generation has a chance and a huge responsibility to change our politics. We must seize it and meet the challenge. So we need to reform our House of Commons, and I support changing our voting system and will vote yes in the referendum on AV. And yes, we need finally to elect the House of Lords, the second chamber, after talking about it for 100 years. And yes, we need more decisions to be made locally, with local democracy free of some of the constraints we placed on it in the past, and frankly free of an attitude which has sometimes looked down its nose at the work that local government does. And I want to congratulate all our local councillors, and I tell you, I will be shoulder to shoulder with you at next May's elections, which must mean victories for Labour up and down this country. And the following year, we'll be proud not only of the Olympics in London, but proud too to see them presided over by the next Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone. I also want to congratulate Una King, actually, for the campaign that she fought as part of the London election. David and I were at school with Una, but unfortunately she was too cool to hang around with us. And Andy Burnham, who up to then had been a friend of mine, recently pointed out that she still is too cool to hang around with me and David. But look, let's be honest about this. Changing our institutions won't be enough to restore trust on its own. Look, in the end, it's politicians who have to change. We've got to reject the old ways of doing politics and must speak to the issues our generation knows it must confront. The focus groups, the polling, they'll tell you there's no votes in green issues. Maybe not. But taking the difficult steps to protect our planet for future generations is the greatest challenge our generation faces. When I think about my son, in 20 years' time, he'll be asking me, were you part of the last generation that didn't get climate change, or were you part of the first generation to get it? And climate change, just like the aging society, can't be tackled by the politics we have, because it doesn't lend itself to the politics of now. Instant results, instant votes, instant popularity, X-factor politics. We can't be imprisoned by the focus groups. Politics has to be about leadership, or it is about nothing. I also know something else, and it won't please everyone in the hall. Wisdom is not the preserve of any one party. Some of the political figures in history who I admire the most are Keynes, Lloyd George and Beveridge, and they weren't members of the Labour Party. Frankly, the political establishment too often conducts debate in a way that insults the intelligence of the public. We must change this for the good of the country. I will be a responsible leader of the opposition. What does that mean? When I disagree with the government, as on the deficit, I will say so loud and clear, and I will take the argument to them. But when Ken Clarke says we need to look at short sentences in prison because of high reoffending rates, I'm not going to say he's soft on crime. When Theresa May says we should review stop and search powers, I'm not going to say she's soft on terrorism. I tell you this conference, our generation must find a new way of conducting politics. And that brings me to some of the names I've been called in this election. Wallace, from Wallace and Gromit. I gather some people can see the resemblance. Forrest Gump. Not so much, I think. And what about Red Ed? Come off it. Let's start to have a grown-up debate in this country about who we are, what we believe, and what kind of country we want to build. A few days ago, our contest came to an end, and now the real contest has begun. I relish the chance to take on David Cameron. We may be of a similar age, but in my values and ideals, I'm of a different and new generation. The new generation is not... The new generation is not simply defined by age, but by attitudes and ideals. And there is a defining difference between us and David Cameron, and that is optimism. We are the heirs to an extraordinary tradition, to great leaders who are above all the optimists of history. The optimism of 1945, which built the National Health Service and the welfare state. The optimism of Harold Wilson and the white heat of technology and the great social reforms of that government. And yes, the optimism of Tony and Gordon, who took on the established thinking and reshaped our country. We are the optimists in politics today. So let's be humble about our past. Let's understand the need to change. Let's inspire people with our vision of the good society. Let the message go out. A new generation has taken charge of Labour. Optimistic about our country. Optimistic about our world. Optimistic about the power of politics. We are the optimists, and together we will change Britain. Thank you very much.
of the Labour Party, Ed Miliband, making his first major speech.